Live from the Clarity from Chaos studios, heard worldwide, it's Dave Campbell. On every episode, Dave and his guests explore, discuss, and work on solutions to some of life's biggest challenges. So, if you're ready, be prepared to be enlightened, amused, and even shocked by what you hear. And now, the real, the authentic, the one and only Dave Campbell.
Welcome, everyone. I'm your host, Dave Campbell, and you are listening to Clarity from Chaos. If you're new to the show, take a moment and go out to my website on Substack. The site address is clarityfromchaos.substack.com. There you can listen to the archive shows, see who the upcoming guests are, and if you'd like, hit the support button on the webpage to help support the show. Now, when I formulated the name of this podcast several years ago, it was based on my views of how the corporate media spun lies concerning the political events of the day. Since those early days of the podcast, I've come to understand that the name of this podcast transcends that early view. What we really have here is a spiritual battle going on, and clarity from chaos is really God's light or his clarity on us to protect us from the evil chaos surrounding us. So with that said, I'd like to share a scripture before we move on. And this is from Isaiah 41, verse 10. Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. We are very pleased to welcome back to Clarity the best-selling author of The Multi-Front War, Defending America from Political Islam, China, Russia, Pandemics, and Racial Strife, Mr. Kenneth Abramowitz. Kenneth is a managing general partner and co-founder of NGN Capital, a $450 million worldwide healthcare venture capital fund. He is also the founder of SaveTheWest.com. Welcome to the show, Ken.
Pleasure to be with you.
So, lots going on in the world today. I noticed that the Ukraine Russia peace deal is back on the table again. So how does that imply, or does it imply anything to your theory about the characters in your book?
Well, the key thesis of my book is that everything's interrelated with everything.
Right.
That's a shocking conclusion. And America has to be strong on every front, because if you're weak on one front, the bad guys will not take you seriously on another front. So even though Ukraine, Russia is in the middle of Europe, Israel, Iran, and its proxies are in the Middle East, and Taiwan and China are in the Far East, and Nigerian Christians fighting for their lives against Muslims, terror organizations, is in Africa. Everything's interrelated. So if you're weak or demonstrate appeasement mentality on one front, the other front say, oh, we can roll over these guys. They appeased, you pick the bad guy, and then the other people aren't afraid. So the key thesis is when you have challenges, you have to try to win every challenge, everywhere, every day, and not send mixed messages like one day you're tough and one day you're willing to listen to and appease the bad guys, because that creates confusion in both the good guys and the bad guys.
So, obviously the 4 years previous to Trump's administration, it was nothing but appeasement. So how do you think Trump is reflecting on the scenario that you just gave out? Do you think he's giving the whole strength aspect to it, or do you think there's some wishy-washy in there? What's your view?
Well, Trump publicly has said, we're going to win, win, win.
Right.
And we're going to win so much, you're going to get tired of winning. So to which my response is, great, let's win, win, win. I agree with you 100%. Let's win, win, win. Just implement your own philosophy. Well, I find that 75% of the time, President Trump is true to his philosophy, and 25% of the time he bends. On Wall Street, I guess they call it something like taco. Trump always caves over or something like that.
Right.
So now, by the way, when you're a politician, you have to bend. So I'm not saying that he's wrong or evil or
No,
for
I
having
think so.
this bending challenge, but that's just the way life works when you're a politician.
Right.
In a perfect world, which we don't live in, someone can be, Winston Churchill and, strong, unconditional surrender and not bend. But we don't live in a perfect world or a simple world like World War II, where everyone understood good and evil. Now people get confused.
Yeah,
Who's
exactly.
who's evil? How good? How good? How evil?
Yeah,
And
exactly. I mean, we've been pushed around to the point where we settle for the gray areas because we really don't have a definition for the baseline of what is good and evil anymore because everything's been kind of flipped on its head and people they don't, at least I'm not seeing a retreat to the basics. I think there's some retreat to the basics, i.e. the religious and so on, but I don't think it's in full scale. It's starting to happen a little bit, but not a great deal. So let's talk about the endless war conditions and the things that are around those conditions.
well, the I'll try to explain the endless war in 2 minutes. There's three groups of enemies that have declared war in America. I call it World War III. And I color code them the reds, the greens, and the blues. The reds are the communists, or former communists or authoritarian governments. That's China, Russia, North Korea, Venezuela, Cuba, among others. And then there's the greens. Those are the Islamists. That's Qatar and Iran. And then they're aided with Turkey and Pakistan. And then there's the blues, color-coded blue for the United Nations color of their helmets. That's the globalists. And that's the UN, World Economic Forum, drug cartels, and certain social media companies. So one obvious question is, if you believe we're in World War III, then when did World War III start? Well, you could say
Uh,
it started on October 7th, 2023,
yeah,
when Hamas, working for Iran, working for China and Russia, attacked Israel, which is America's number one ally. So you could say that was World War III. You can go to 2014 when Russia invaded Ukraine and no one did much of anything. You could say that was, except Ukraine, you could say
right,
that was World War III. And if you want to go further back into the past, the war with the Reds began 200 years ago when Karl Marx wrote his baloney book, Das Kapital, about communism. The Green War, 1400 years ago, when Muhammad and his followers decided to take over the world and kill all the Christians, Jews, and Hindus. And you could say the Blue War began 100 years ago with the League of Nations. So you could say World War III is actually World War I, depending upon how you want to count.
yeah, exactly, yeah,
These three endless wars. And,
right,
and if you want me to go back to biblical history, when the battle was between God and the pagans, the Jews 3,500 years ago, Christians 2,000 years ago, who were fighting the pagans of their time. You could say that the Reds, the Greens, and the Blues are the pagans of our time, and that
right,
nothing's changed since biblical times. It's still God versus the pagans. It's just we call pagans different names over time. And so it's both World War III and World War I at the same time. And so now the question is, okay, if you believe we're in World War III, if you believe that it's been going on in modern time and in biblical time, so what are you supposed to do about it? Now,
yeah, yeah, exactly. I think that was my follow-on question. What's to be done here? Because like you've cited, basically we've been at war since the beginning, almost,
that's right.
right?
Right.
Yeah,
That's
and the names changed just to protect the innocent, right? So
that's right.
they just reach their hand down into the primordial pool and pull out another one and just name it whatever they want to name it. So,
Right. Well, I have a little analogy about that. I pretend I fly to Africa and start talking with some animals in the jungle and pretend animals speak English. I say, Mr. Animal, everything looks so peaceful and tranquil in Africa. It looks like peacetime. And the animal laughs, pretending animals can laugh. And he says, peacetime? Every day, someone's trying to eat me, and I'm trying to eat somebody else. There's no such thing as peacetime in the jungle. And
right.
then the animal says to me, did you really come all the way from America to ask me a question that's stupid? So the point is, human beings always have been fighting each other. So that's why I call it World War I.
Right.
But then when you look at the modern names, I call it World War III. So it's a
Well,
continuum. And the question is, how do you defeat the pagans? It's really
Exactly.
the question.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's precisely the question: is how do you defeat the pagans?
The forces of good have to impose themselves over the forces of evil, or else the forces of evil will impose themselves on the forces of good.
Right. Okay.
So I have an expression: evil people, call them pagans. Evil people are good at being evil, and good people, call them God-fearing people, or people with a conscience, if you want to leave God
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. Yeah.
People
Exactly.
with a conscience, the good people are bad at being good. So I and you and others are trying to close the gap between good people and bad people and evil people, and we have to be better at it. We have to be tougher. We have to start arresting bad guys. We have to re-educate bad guys. We have to take control over our schools, our K through 12, our teachers' colleges, our universities, Hollywood, media, social media, our culture. We have to reassert traditional American values, which I call summarize with life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for everybody.
Right.
The Bible summarizes it with the 10 Commandments for everybody. So I say, fine, take life, liberty, and happiness, plus the Constitution, plus the Bill of Rights, plus the 10 Commandments, put it together and say, I'm the government of the United States, and I expect everybody to follow
Follow the rules. Yeah.
the rules and stay within the culture.
Right.
And that's what I expect. And if you don't do it, I'm going to suggest that you do it. And if you still don't do it, I'm going to re-educate you. And if I have to, I'll arrest you.
Okay.
It's basically adult supervision. It's like having
Yeah.
children to control because
Yeah.
you went away for the evening and you
Yeah.
come back and the kids, the 8 years olds, are drinking beer and eating pretzels in the place.
Yeah.
Big mess.
Yeah. Exactly. It's like going back to parenthood again, or at least what parenthood should be, right? As opposed to just parking a kid in front of some kind of a digital network and letting the digital network raise them. So you mentioned the 7 forms of warfare or the combinations to defeat this. Can we go into those 7 forms?
Okay. Well, if you interview 10 pedestrians and you say, "Please define war for me," they'll say, "Well, that's pretty obvious. It's kinetic. In other words, things blow up. Bullets,
Right.
artillery, airplane."
Death. Yeah,
Okay,
death. Yeah, death, destruction, the whole
right.
thing, right.
Okay, what people don't think about is that there's 6 other forms of warfare which are just as deadly over time. So, there's chemical and biological and
Yeah.
arson. And so, for example, the Chinese Communist Party killed 1,000,000 Americans with COVID and 1,000,000 Americans with fentanyl. And does anyone know? I mean, a few people know, but no. If they had just blown up Phoenix, just pretend, people say, "Oh, they blew up Phoenix. We're in a state of war. Do something." But when
Right.
you kill people over a 10-year period of time and it's very diffuse, no one remembers. But anyways, that's the second form of warfare. A third form of warfare is what I call cultural warfare. You, me, we are cultural warriors. Everyone listening in is cultural warrior. We don't have bullets. We don't have uniforms. But we don't shoot anybody. But we use our brain and our eyes and our ears and our mouth, and we fight with words. We argue. We convince. Sometimes we get angry. But that's cultural warfare.
Sure.
Another form of warfare is economics, boycotts, for example. Another is legal warfare, also known as lawfare. And another form of warfare is demographics. For example, the open border during the 4 years of the rogue Biden administration was demographic warfare by the federal government against the American people. They imported something like 20 million illegals and
Right.
very much complicated our society because many of them were criminals. And then the seventh form of warfare is cyber. So when you're fighting a war, you're fighting 7 wars at the same time. Now, if you do a good job on number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, then you don't have to revert to kinetic warfare. But when you fail on the 6 less lethal forms of warfare, you're stuck with no choice but to fight a kinetic war.
Well, okay. So the non-kinetic aspects that you've talked about, are you talking about within the domestic definition of the United States, or are you talking about it globally? Because right now, socially and all the other forms, lawfare and whatnot, all are within the confines of the continental United States, right? It does, or are you expanding that?
Well, if you go back to what people traditionally call World War I and II, the war was over there. Remember, there was a famous song, "Over
Sure.
there, over there." Now, in
Right.
World War III, I use the Beatles song as an analogy. They had a song, "Here, There, and Everywhere." So just because the map says that Russia's over there and China's over there and Iran's over there and Qatar's over there, doesn't mean they're not here.
Right.
The bad guys have infiltrated the country through many different mechanisms, but primarily with those other six forms of warfare. So,
Okay.
and the bad guys are particularly good at cultural warfare, and we're
Yes.
particularly bad at cultural warfare. And they
Right.
found our soft underbelly, and therefore they're attacking us with media, social media, the educational system, Hollywood, to undermine our culture in every way possible. We don't regard it as a war, but I regard it as a war. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, to alert people as to the seven forms of warfare, because we have to win on all seven forms of warfare against the reds, greens, and blues. And if you multiply three bad guys and seven forms of warfare, it's 21 mini wars in World War III. And we need a strategy to win 21 times. We also need a management structure. First, we need someone to say we're in World War III, and we need someone to be appointed the manager in charge of ending World War III and or managing World War III. And we haven't done that. And that's why things look chaotic, because we go from one issue to another issue and people don't see the commonality of the issues.
No, and I think our current president understands what you're talking about, but I don't believe, I mean, you have an entire party now that has shifted basically to the red guys, right? To the Marx. Yeah.
The Democrats are the reds, the greens, and the blues.
Yeah. I
So
mean, yeah, they I
parties
mean,
are enemies.
yeah, exactly. They have definitively moved over there. But
Well, based on that, the Democrat Party was taken over by the
wow,
Reds, the Greens, and the Blues over roughly a 25-year period of time. President Clinton transformed the Democrats into a criminal organization and then call it the Reds. And then President Obama converted into a green and blue
right.
organization. And then Biden first term was really Obama's third term, and so Obama had three terms to take the base of Clinton's criminality and mold it into a red, green, and blue subversive party.
Right.
And that's where we are today, unfortunately.
Yeah, and forgive me here, but I'm not seeing a lot of people. Obviously, the late Charlie Kirk was one of them that was trying to stand up to this, but I'm not seeing a lot. Now, the House just recently passed a resolution against socialism, but I'm not seeing what I would consider an all-out effort to start to change the direction of the Queen Mary relative to what we're talking about here. I'm not seeing, like you had mentioned, putting somebody at point on the point to start resolving these conflicts. I'm just not seeing it. Trump's personality is trying to attack it, but he's not getting any help.
That's right. So there's two separate issues that you're getting to. Number one is we need President Trump to appoint one person to be responsible for World War III. In World War II, people say that General George Marshall was the point person for World War II, and he was basically managing the process. So we knew we were in World War II. We don't know we're in World War III. We had a General George Marshall, and he was managing the process. So we need first to acknowledge that we're in World War III. Second, we need President Trump to appoint one person to be responsible for it, because President Trump has 1,000 things to do, and he needs one person to focus on World War III. And the third thing we need is we need someone to manage the cultural war. You see, of the
Yeah.
seven forms of warfare, we have someone responsible for each of them except cultural warfare.
Right.
There's no Department of Cultural Warfare or
Yeah.
cultural preservation.
No.
There's no Secretary of Cultural Preservation. I have an analogy. They should call him the Secretary of Truth. We're not going to have
No.
a Secretary of Truth.
No.
The
No.
bad guys have a Minister of Propaganda, we need someone
Right.
comparable, but on the good guy side
Right.
to manage that process. Now, just to finish this point, is maybe only 5 people qualified to be at this minister or the Secretary of Cultural Preservation. Charlie Kirk was one of them. He was,
Right.
in effect, an unofficial, non governmental appointed minister of culture, and we didn't protect him. We didn't know how precious he was. We
Right.
didn't know how important he was. We didn't protect him. He should have had Secret Service like protection, even though he wasn't a government employee. And we didn't know that, and that was a mistake. But we need someone like a Charlie Kirk to, yeah, Mark Levin, could be Newt Gingrich. There's a handful of other people who could do the job, General Jack Keane, and to be that
Yeah.
mythical secretary.
Yeah. I think Levin would be a great person to challenge that, because he's pretty much rooted in the basics all the way across the board. Plus, he's got the life experience to apply to the whole issue. So, I think it would be phenomenal. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, he's already functioning at some point in the Trump administration, is he not?
Well, he's a little bit like a Charlie Kirk. And by the way, Dan Bongino could also do this.
I think just from an age standpoint, Bongino would be great too.
Right.
So go ahead.
So the point I'm getting to is we have, let's say, 5 or 10 well known,
Right.
in effect, secretaries of culture, and we have, let's just say, 100 lesser known secretaries of culture. And we don't call them that. We just enjoy their podcasts, like your podcasts, or their interviews, or their speeches, or their websites. But because it's diffused, because there's 100 secretaries of cultural preservation,
Right.
the message is not as strong as
Right.
if we had Mark Levin as the official Secretary of Cultural Preservation, working with these 100 non governmental employees, trying to coordinate some messaging. You can see how more effective it would all be.
Well, absolutely. I think Prager would be a good one too.
Dennis Prager, yes.
I
I'm
think
so,
Prager, because
yes,
he's already got a pretty wide footprint from a media standpoint, the same as Levin. So I think there's a lot of really great candidates, but your point being, we need to get off the dime and we actually need to implement, right? We just don't need to sit here and talk about it all the rest of whatever. We need to actually get it moving.
Now, I should mention we also have a failed Secretary of Cultural Preservation. It's Tucker Carlson.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not sure what happened there.
He went off the deep end.
I'm not sure if he got a hold of some bad coffee or what happened, but he definitely plunged off the end of the pier for some reason. And I'm not quite sure why, but yeah, I would agree with you that he's pretty much spent all the great capital that he had up to a point. He's already squandered it.
Right. So it's tragic. But
Yeah.
fortunately, as I said, we have 10 other good
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
great people, and we have
Yeah.
another 100, and for all I know, 200 or 300 very good people. And we just have to put our heads together a little bit better. And
Yeah.
and it would be nice if we had a little more direction from the government, because then our microphone would be bigger. See, as soon
Right.
as you take yourself, for example, and take whatever audience you have, and now pretend you become Secretary of Cultural Preservation, your audience just went up, a
Yeah.
gazillion fold.
Sure.
And now everyone's listening to you all the time.
Right.
Now, in the absence of a Secretary of Culture, President Trump is in effect our Secretary of Cultural
Yeah.
Preservation.
No, I would agree, because his persona is so great that he's encompassing all of the different attributes that we're talking about here. But you also made a great point. He can't be there at all of those points all of the time, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, he's juggling too many plates, right?
That's right. So let's just say he's Secretary of Cultural Preservation 10% of the time, which is wonderful. But we need someone who wakes up as Secretary of Cultural Preservation 100% of the time to
Right.
complement him in his 10% of the time. And
Absolutely.
by the way, Israel has the same issue. The Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, is an excellent Secretary of Cultural Preservation 10% of the time. But 90% of the time, he's fighting all the other
Yeah.
places.
Yeah,
that are
exactly. Yeah, he's duck.
in the
Yeah.
air.
Yeah, he's ducking bullets the other 90% of the
Right.
time. So,
Right.
which is unfortunate just in itself. So, yeah, I truly think that's a great idea, Ken. I think that needs to be promoted more and more that we tackle those 6 non-kinetic forms since we basically have all the bad players in this country already and just open up a big can of whoop ass on them, you know?
Now, by the way, this can be done on a state basis. We have 50 uh,
Right.
governors, of course. I think 27, the last I checked, were Republican. They're spending 10% of their time as the Secretary of Cultural Preservation of Tennessee or whatever. But again,
Right.
they could appoint someone full time to be the equivalent of Secretary of Cultural Preservation, and maybe that would catch on, and other states would do it. And by
Could
the way,
very well.
mayors can do it.
Oh yeah, no, I think you could probably boil it down to just city council kinds of things, and just start from a grassroots standpoint and start pushing it up the ladder.
By the way, we were talking about how Tucker Carlson was a failed Secretary of Cultural Preservation. Well, on a city level, Mayor-elect Mamdani is an example of a failed or soon-to-be failed Secretary of Cultural
Very
Preservation.
much so.
He's
Yeah,
more Secretary of Cultural Destruction, and so we need someone every bit as good as he is evil.
I agree completely. I agree completely. That's why I've shifted this show over to where it's really not, and you've spoken about it. It's really not Democrats, Republicans, whatever. It's very, very binary at this point. It's good versus evil. And you don't have to look around very much to see the good versus the evil piece because it's everywhere.
Well,
And
to quote the Beatles, it's here, there, and everywhere.
here, there, and everywhere. Exactly. Well, as always, it's been terrific talking to you. Your book, The Multi-Front War Defending America from Political Islam, China, Russia, Pandemics, and Racial Strife. We've been talking to Mr. Kenneth Abramowitz. And Ken, it's been an absolute pleasure again. And I hope to have you back on, and we'll continue to rattle the cage on this topic and see if we can get some forward momentum.
And people should sign up for my public service website, savethewest.com. I write an article every 2 weeks. There's a pop-up menu. All they have to do is put their email address in, and they get my letter every 2 weeks. It's complimentary. They should take advantage of it.
Yep. Again, Ken, it's been an absolute pleasure, sir.
Okay. Pleasure anytime.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank
You're
you for
welcome.
listening. If you would like to listen to more Clarity from Chaos shows on demand, go to clarityfromchaos.buzzsprout.com or send Dave an email at info@clarityfromchaos.com for information on previous shows. You can also listen to the show on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Twitter, or Google Podcast. Until next time, please remember, it's not about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain. Be well, everyone.